Go ahead and get started. So I really want to thank you for joining us today as we do the third webinar in our series of 5 about neuroplasticity and how it relates to different parts of our lives and how we function. Today's webinar is on neuroplasticity as it relates to sleep. The studies show that sleep is, really, really important for us in our lives. Systemic maintenance, all the way down to cellular maintenance, is primarily performed during sleep. The creation, destruction, cleaning, and rejuvenation of our nervous system are mostly performed while we are sleeping. This is why if you're sick or injured, they say, hey, get lots of rest, sleep a lot, and it'll help you get better faster. You also may not have known that our cells are constantly creating some waste that has to be removed. And so as they do, and while we're sleeping, this, our process of sleep cleans our nervous system and our neurons. So this is all performed based on our unconscious understanding of what we need to survive. So our sleep does the creation, destruction, cleaning, and rejuvenation based on the guidelines from our genetics, our past lives, and our beliefs. So that system may recreate old fear-based behaviors in its processing. So if we're trying to make change, our sleep may actually move us backwards because the sleep process of creating the nerves is going to constantly take us back based on our old understanding of what's important and what we need to survive. So it's like, we're moving forward and we're trying to avoid fears or behaviors that we don't want anymore. Something like, hey, being scared of lizards or dogs, and as we spend time changing how we feel about those things when we sleep, our nervous system may actually revert. So it's important to keep practicing on a daily basis. The majority of growth and decline happens while we're sleeping. So it's that, neuroplasticity that helps us grow and keep developing. It takes place, for the most part, about 80% of the change that's happening based on what's happening in our lives happens while we're sleeping. The neurological wiring, which manages our sleep, begins to form the last trimester of our pregnancy before we were born, when we were in utero. So how we sleep is then continually entrained into our nervous system as we are growing up. Remember, that's happening where we're adding nerves every day. So as you think about it, as you sleep and sleep and sleep, we're developing that process of sleep, and the sheer volume of those sleep nerves are usually developed by the time we're 7 or 8 years old. And so our sleep patterns are often determined by that time. They used to say that by the time we were 7 or 8, our personalities were set. And a lot of that has to do with the volume of nerves that we create in the very beginning of our lives and how they begin in the middle of our bodies and we grow out from there. And so all of the growth is dependent on what they were doing. When I say they, I mean our nerves. We're doing in the first 7 or 8 years of our lives. So, sleep happens in cycles, and those cycles are interacting with the process of neuroplasticity differently. And so I'm going to try to simplify it here kind of real quick. So our Pathwaves simplified version of sleep is that when we enjoy healthy sleep, we sleep in cycles, which last for approximately 90 minutes each. And those cycles kind of go through 4 basic levels of sleep. And we may hit those or cross back and forth between those multiple times in each cycle. But in really healthy sleep, you're going to kind of move from awake or almost awake into REM. REM is rapid eye movement. That's why it's REM. And that's really mostly when we're dreaming. That's when most of the dreaming happens. And then we go into light and then into deep. So in each one of these phases or levels in each cycle, different biological actions are occurring. And those different levels and affect us in different ways. Each cycle actually has a different focus on what it's helping change biologically in physiology. So ideally, we will sleep through 4 or 5 cycles every night. So here is a picture of what they call our sleep architecture. And I got this from a Harvard research study about sleep. And as you can see, this shows the cycles and the architecture. It looks kind of like buildings, right? But that's really from awake into REM and then into the different levels of light and deep sleep. And on the bottom are the numbers of hours. And so, in the 7 hours that are shown in this slide, that it represents, 4 cycles of sleep. So what is running this process for us is our un and subconscious. So how we, genetically formed and lived our lives kind of trains and conditions our sub and unconscious to process and help us rejuvenate our biological systems. And that's all about, the neuroplasticity of building new nerves and getting rid of the ones we don't want and altering the ones that are in place and then rejuvenating everything. So we go into REM, and at Pathwaves, our description, simplified description of what REM is all about is about dreaming about our lives so that our unconscious and subconscious can understand how, what we need to rejuvenate for. So that dreaming is kind of like us figuring out, what's happening in our lives. So we can understand that, tomorrow I need to be ready to do these things in my life. And then our bodies are going to rejuvenate biologically so that we are ready to do that. So after we hit REM, we go into that light and deep sleep, which is when the nervous system is actually adjusting to the reconciliation of our life through our dreams, which we just went through. And studies show that, little bits of dreams will pop in there, which is actually helping our body make those adjustments. And so REM, a lot of the studies show is not the only time we're dreaming, but that's most of the dreaming process that's going on. And this is really, in the light and the deep sleep, this is really when we are creating the neurological connections, the wiring to all the systems of the body in order to support physiologically what we believe we need, and we have just sorted out through the REM sleep. And so each cycle is for a different biological set of systems. And so that's why we're going through these. And the first system that we're rejuvenating is the adrenal system, which is the system that creates energy, which is a good reason why we should rejuvenate that first, so that we can know how much energy we need to rejuvenate the rest of the systems of our body. This is also speaks to how it's kind of important to get to sleep by midnight, because our system wants to rejuvenate and go through that adrenal system before 2 a.m. So that's why a lot of people say, it's important to get to bed or start going to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock. Now, the multiple cycles are cycling through the multiple parts of our nervous system. And each part, each system, each nervous system set has its own purpose. For example, digestion. So the nerves that run our digestive system are all about digesting our food, but they have to check in with all the other systems to know how to digest our food, to give us the nutrients we need for whatever it is that we're supposed to be getting ready for the next day. So during sleep, these systems are adjusting in order to work better with each other, heal, and then expel the waste that has been built up. These interdependent adjustments of these systems affect whether we will follow that healthy sleep architecture or not. And this is all dependent on our mental health as well as our physical health. Accordingly, the sleep processes, sleep architecture, cycles, etc., are going to vary significantly from person to person and as we age and as we grow in life. Because sleep is so important, just like we have said, it is important to intentionally affect our neuroplasticity. It's also important to affect how we sleep. It's really important to learn how to plan and manage our sleep so that we are both physiologically and psychologically in a process that's going to help us the most. This sleep planning requires intentional management of both the psychology and the physiology. So we like to talk about sleep planning at Pathways. Sleep planning includes things like trying to go to sleep around the same time each day, using breathing techniques, avoid food and beverages that cause us to interrupt our sleep, having a routine that you follow before you go to sleep. You know, these kinds of things. You know, it's just like a little too much for me to go through it all now, and this webinar is really about neuroplasticity as it relates to sleep and not about the best way to sleep. But there's a great discussion of this on our website under the resources tab. So you can just search sleep and be able to see that. But this webinar, I'm going to keep talking more about neuroplasticity. So let's talk about the EEG perspective, right? And that's how we see the effect of the neuroplasticity. And at Pathways, we have reviewed over 16,000 brainwave scans through an EEG, electroencephalography equipment. And there are particular parts of the brain that have a significant effect on sleep. Accordingly, in our scans, we've identified the correlative patterns from these areas of the brain, which allow us to provide a numerical representation of a person's ability to sleep optimally. That's pretty cool, right? This is because of how the neuroplasticity process and sleep are such a large part of each other that we're able to see the processes in the brain. The point here is that if we want to, we can influence our neuroplasticity so that we can sleep better and live better lives. Thank goodness we can. Because I want to thrive. You know, to me, it's all about thriving. So unless you intentionally change your nervous system's primary goal, which is survival, to thrival, a main part of that is avoiding things that hurt us or could hurt us. And fear of those things often causes sleep interruption. You know, if we're worried about something, then while we're sleeping, the neuroplasticity process is actually going to change our nervous system to create the energy for whatever we're worrying about. So learning how to intentionally influence the process called neuroplasticity is imperative to sleep at the highest levels possible. Be able to sleep to thrive instead of just sleeping to survive. So I really, in summary, the science of neuroplasticity shows that sleep is vitally important to our mental as well as our physical health. And it's really important to pay attention to the fact that we're both. If you want to improve how you're functioning or living your life, neuroplasticity means that you can. And it is really important to try to manage your sleep to make that neuroplasticity work in the best way possible for whatever you want and wish to happen in your life. How you live and sleep each and every day has a direct effect on how your nervous systems function and how you're going to be able to live your lives. Your opinions of this process while you're sleeping, so you can rejuvenate your nerves and body to be ready for the next day and what you think you need, are really, really important. So it's important when we're going to sleep to kind of set our opinions, our perspectives, our ideas of how we want to be rejuvenated. So that while we're sleeping, the process of neuroplasticity will create our nerves in a more elevated, more functional way for the things we want in our lives. So I hope you understand that neuroplasticity is a really important part of living, and so is sleep, and the two working together. It's really important to be in charge of those processes so that we can live happy, healthy, and whole. You know, and with today's technology and awareness, it's easier than ever before to train our nervous system and our sleep so that we can continually improve our lives and live the life we've always dreamed of. If you agree with me that it's time and you want to find out more on neuroplasticity and sleep, go to pathwayslife.com and click on a schedule free call for your free consultation. So I really want to thank you for joining me today on this webinar about neuroplasticity and sleep. And, you know, it's a great time for us to be able to take on and be in charge of this area of our lives so that we can have a healthier and happier life. So I'm going to go ahead and close and open it up for questions. Jennifer, are there any questions?